Hello everyone, welcome to the presentation of the 2025 Code of Points for Men's Artistic Gymnastics. This presentation will give you a first view of what's coming on the next year code. We're going to have two parts. This is part one, where we're going to be talking about the general part and only on floor exercise and pommel horse. The part number two, we're going to be covering rings, vault, parallel bars, and high bar. This presentation shows my personal point of view of the new code as it is known as of July 2024. There might be some things that are mistakes for the future or concepts that are going to change in the following weeks. By no means I intend to have this as an official document, but it's just as an introduction for anyone who wants to study the new rules. This presentation is based on the document that was published last year in August, where the first changes were shown. On April 2024, the first version was published of the Code of Points, and a few days ago there was a version 1.1, which basically what it did is corrected some mistakes, and all the documents that are going to be used for the new code as well as the courses are only going to be in English, so it's very important to know that when you take the course. What we're going to do is talk about the things that have changed. This presentation we're going to talk a little bit of an execution, because the execution has not changed a lot, but some things have been changed a bit. But we're going to try to cover everything new, and after the general part we're going to talk about the difficulty on each of the apparatuses. We're going to have some examples. In this presentation we have 4 examples on floor and 5 examples on pommel horse, which basically cover most of the changes. Maybe not all, but I hope this will be a good start for everyone who wants to know about the new code. Well, there are many changes. The difficulty changes are the ones that may call more the attention. On floor exercise, we have had 13 elements that have been increased in value, all of them belonging to element group 3, or the backward acro elements. None of the elements on this apparatus has been decreased in value. On pommel horse, decreased in value 7 and increased only 1. We're going to talk on what specific elements we're talking about when we specifically talk on each of the apparatuses. On steel rings, 3 elements have been decreased and 7 has been increased in value. On bolt, all the bolts have been decreased in value by 0.4. On P-bars, 14 elements have been upgraded in value and only 5 have been decreased. On high bar, 14 elements, all of them belong to the flight elements, element group number 2, and none of them has been decreased. Okay, so let's get started with the new rules. We're gonna talk about the basic score calculation. And we see the D score plus the E score plus the connection values minus the neutral deductions. That's the way we will calculate the final score. However, some changes have been introduced on the D score. Only top 8 elements for seniors and for juniors. That means 7 elements plus the dismount. So there's no differentiation between seniors and juniors. They will use the same number of elements. Also 4 element groups. This might be the biggest change. We're going to talk about the element groups on the next slide. but we still have 4 groups. Connection values are just as we know them. There are only connection values on floor as we know them now, with double saltos or saltos without turns. And on high bar, we know the connection between flight to flight and flight to element group 3. And what's new is that now group 1 elements can be connected to flight elements. Something also new, stick landing. There's a bonus of 0.1 for landing on all pieces, but on pommel horse. This can be awarded for C value or higher dismount on all the apparatus, but pommel horse, and for bolts that include a salto. So the other part of the final score, which is the E score, the execution, I think the execution has changes, but not as important as the changes that have been made in the difficulty part. We're going to talk about most of the execution general deductions in this presentation, and as we move on, we're going to talk about the specific deductions that are new for every apparatus. Neutral deductions are always present. However, on floor, there are now more options because more special requirements are introduced. We know the gymnast needs a double salto. We're going to talk about that later. Now they have they have to perform a balance scale, so that's a new neutral deduction. And some neutral deductions that have been deleted from this cycle. On pommel horse, there is no need to perform on all 3 parts of the horse. That has been deleted from the code. So maybe the part that we need to talk more about is the element groups. So right now, with the 2022 Code of Points, we need to award 0.5 for every group if the gymnast performs any kind of difficulty for group 1, 2, and 3. And you know the dismount can be 0 if there's no dismount, 0.3 if it's a partial dismount, or 0.5 if the value of the dismount is D or higher. So this is a big change, because right now every element group has to fulfill certain requirements, so you can award 0.3 or 0.5 or maybe more than 0.5. So we start with element group 1. Element group 1 on all the apparatuses needs to be covered by any kind of difficulty element. So an A element or B element or whatever difficulty value will get 0.5 on every single event. So we know that on floor the element group 1 is the non-acro, pommel horse is the scissors, on rings is the swings, and high bar is also the swings, and on P-bars it used to be the support elements. So on P-bars there's a big change, because now group 1 is what we used to know, the upper arm, or group 2. So that's what they did a change, so that those 5 groups can be covered with any difficulty to get 0.5. That will need a lot of practice on pre-bars, so we don't confuse the group 2 and 1. So that's for group 1, and now for group 2 and 3, and I also include group 4 on floor, and I will explain why in a moment. For these 3 groups, the gymnast needs a D or higher element to get 0.5. And if this group is covered by an A, B, or C element, the gymnast only gets 0.3. Obviously, if there is no element, the gymnast gets 0.0. Another big change is we used to have 5 elements per group, now it's only 4 elements per element group. So we continue with element group number 4. We talked about element group number 4 on the floor, and I must anticipate you that element group number 4 on the floor has changed. It used to be a dismount group, and it could be covered by any element from group 2 and 3, which was the backward and forward elements. However, now the group number 4 on floor is the twisting elements. We no longer have a dismount group on floor, and however, pommel horse, rings, p-bars, and high bar, we still get the dismount group as element group number 4. So we talk about this, that the element group number 4 for these 4 events will equal the value of the element. That means if the gymnast performs an A value dismount, he will only get 0.1, but if the gymnast performs a G dismount, he will get 0.7. So if they perform a D dismount, they will get 0.4. So in this particular group, the gymnast can get more than 0.5 for this group. That means the group's elements on these apparatuses can be awarded more than 2 points, depending on the value of the dismount. And again, I repeat, since there is no dismount group on the floor, then the maximum points that you can award on floor is 2.0, because there is no dismount group. So the rule that the difficulty value of the element can be awarded to group 4 does not apply on floor exercise, but only to pommel horse, rings, p-bars, and high bar. That's the main difference between the floor and the rest of the elements. So that needs a bit of practice from the judges. The stick bonus, we have the stick bonus of 0.1 for C or higher dismounts that have a stock landing, and the exception is on pommel horse. Stick bonus also applies to bolts with saltos. That means a normal handspring, even if a stock doesn't get a stick bonus, but for example, a handspring forward to front tucked, if it's stuck, then the judge can give a 0.1 bonus for stick landing. Stick bonus is defined as no movement of the feet, and very important that other deductions will not block the stick bonus. That means if the gymnast lands with legs apart, with excessive arm swings, or maybe with incomplete twist, can be another error, he will still get the stick bonus. Also on floor exercise, last element on floor exercise can receive a stick bonus, even if it's not among the top 8 elements. There can be some cases where the last element on floor is not needed for the difficulty score. It's very particular routines where that can happen, but it's not going to be the rule. And when we start to judge the routines made for the new rules, and I think it's not going to happen. The stick bonus is going to be applied to the D score, and if the dismount on steel rings, p-bars, high bar, and the last element on floor exercise or a bolt with a salto is stuck, then the bonus must be credited. I talked to the president of the FIG MTC, Artur Smikevich, and what his words were, this is a bonus has been introduced to make the sport more attractive to the audience, So whenever it is needed to credit the stick bonus, it has to be given. So the next part, it's about the short exercises. Since we only have 8 parts, the deductions for short exercises start at 5 elements. And it's the same as it's been right now. For example, for 5 parts, the gymnast gets deducted 3 points. 4 parts, 4 points, and so on. If the gymnast shows 6, 7, or 8 elements, there is no neutral deduction. So basically, just like the same table we use for the juniors during this cycle. Well, talking about the general part, we see the one-touch warm-up. What the new code says is each competing gymnast is entitled to a 50-second touch warm-up before the start of the competition. And he has the right to do 2 vaults warm-up on vault. So the 50 seconds used to be only for P-bars. Now it's for all the pieces. And what the FIG MTC says is that most gymnasts are preparing the high bar, are preparing the rings, of course the P-bars, the pommel horse. They need to set the separation and prepare the apparatus. Maybe the floor is the only one that doesn't need a preparation, but in order to be the same for all the apparatuses, then they decided to do 50 seconds for all. The rule for P-bars, where the team can prepare the apparatus or the P-bars during qualification or team finals. Also, the warm-up time belongs to the team, and for individuals, the 50 seconds are per gymnast, and no more than 3 people, including the competing gymnast, can prepare the apparatus. That hasn't changed. The only change is that the time, the 50 seconds, is more than we get now, only 30 seconds. Well, I'm going to try to spend a bit more on execution because this presentation will not do some execution practice, because what's more important to understand now are the difficulty changes that have been made. Really, the execution deductions are mostly the same that we are using now. So I'm going to talk about most of the execution deductions of the tables. And I will tell you where there have been changes. For example, the bending of the arms, legs, or body is the same as we use now. Slight bending up to 45 degrees, only 0.1, up to 90 degrees, 0.3, and more than 90 degrees, it's 0.5 and no recognition, but by the jury. This has not changed, as well as the bending of the arms or body on holds and strength presses, which is not the same deduction that the first one we talked about. In this case, there is less tolerance, up to 15 degrees, 0.1, up to 30, 0.3, up to 45 is 0.5, but still recognition. But it's over 45 degrees, then it is also a 0.5 deduction plus non-recognition. So we need to make the difference between the holds and strength presses that have less tolerance, and bending of the arms, legs, or body on dynamic elements. It's a big difference. Maybe double the tolerance. So it doesn't have to be used the same table for the 2 kind of elements we're talking about. So these 2 have not changed. These are the same tables that we know in the current code. Now you see the angular deviations on strength holds. We have some dots there. So this table has changed. The tolerance now it starts at 5 degrees and 20 degrees for a small error, and then it goes all the way from 20 to 45 for a medium error. And the large error is over 45 plus no recognition. I think this is going to be more simple for the judges. It's going to be better separation for the gymnasts that do 0.3 or 0.5 deductions. I remember when the time of the hold parts used to be a problem, and the NTC simplified their table. It ended up being a good decision, and I think this is going to be a good decision also. We're going to see what time says about it. Maybe you can say, who's going to notice the 5 degrees? Well, it can make a difference. Just a bit of tolerance in the strength holds. Also, the angular deviations on swing to handstand we're showing the table, but has no changes as the table we know now. Up to 15, no deductions. Up to 30, it's a 0.1. Up to 45, it's a 0.3. And more than 45, it's 0.5 plus no recognition from the D jury. Angular deviation of the shoulders body on swings to holds on steel rings. This is also changed. It used to be 0 to 15, but now the small error starts at 5 degrees to 20 degrees, just as the table we talked about for the angular deviations on the hold and strength parts. The time, it's also the same table we know now. 2 seconds no deduction, less than 2 seconds 0.3, and no stop, it's a 0.5 plus no recognition. So on the execution we have 2 changes. Both of them are for the rings on hold parts and on the swing to strength parts. That's element group 2 and 3 as we know it now. Some other tables, the separation of the feet during landing. This is the same as we know now. One of the newsletters in this cycle defined the separation of the feet up to 10 centimeters in order not to get a deduction. So the table is the same. I'm not going to read all this because it's long and you can do it on your own, but the same principle applies. If the gymnast is allowed a 10 centimeter separation of his feet, and they need to join the heels without lifting the toes. So if the separation is more than 10 centimeters and less than shoulder width, they get a 0.1 deductions, on 0.3 if the separation is more than shoulder width. The definition and deductions for the small and large step or hop is the same as we know from the code of 2022, as the deductions for low landing that was introduced during this cycle. If the hips are below the knees, then it's a 0.5 deduction for low landing. Lowering of the legs, which is the last table of execution we're going to talk about. It's also the same. This can be used on pommel horse, P-bars, even high bar or floor during presses to handstand. So it's 0.1 for deviation of 15 degrees from the original position, 0.3 up to 30, 0.5 up to 45 degrees, and 0.5 if it's over 45. And this means also non-recognition. So as a summary on the execution deductions, general part, there has been only 2 changes that are to be applied on the steel rings for group 2 elements, the strength holds. Now the tolerance is increased a bit to 5 degrees and 20 degrees, but that's for the small deductions. But the medium error, now it's a bit wider. It's from 20 to 45. And anything that deviates 45 degrees, more than 45 degrees, automatically receives no credit. And the same is for the swing to strength holds. Then the rest of the tables are the same. However, there have been some other execution changes that we're going to talk specifically as we talk of the apparatus that is involved. So with this, we end with the general part, and we're going to start to talk about the floor exercise. Well, I think floor exercise is going to be one of the most difficult apparatuses to be judged for the exam, to study for the exam, because you're going to see why when I go to the practice exercises. So let's start with what has been changed. Well, the duration of the floor is going back to 70 seconds maximum, and then with the signal at 60 and 70 seconds, just as it used to be before this cycle. A big change is the Keikha style round-off, or the round-off that used to do a quarter turn to the front. It's not going to be permitted on this cycle, and as a consequence, the elements that follow the Keikha style round-off are not going to receive credit. Diagonal use has been changed also. The maximum number of diagonal can be used is only 2 times, as 3 that's currently the rule. But after 2 times of the same diagonal, the gymnast has to move to a corner. The definition of diagonals and the corners is the same as the definition we use now for this cycle. Another change that's important is the balance element, a scale. That's element group 1.61 or 62 has to be included, and it doesn't need to be inside the top 8 elements. If no balance scale is presented, then there is a neutral deduction of 0.3. So if you start watching the routines from the last 2 or 3 cycles, you're going to see that maybe most of the gymnasts, all of the gymnasts have this as a neutral deduction. Another change is the dismount for seniors has to be a double salto. So the special requirement on floor is not the double forward or backward with or without turns inside the exercise, but now the seniors must do it at the end. They can do it as the first line or the second line, but the requirement is on the dismount, on the last element, I should say. And for juniors, the rule remains the same. The double salto can be performed at any place in the exercise, either as a dismount or the first line or the second line, etc. In any case, if the gymnast doesn't show the double salto, it's a 0.3 neutral deduction. So let's remember, I'm sure you all know it, but as I said before, the double salto means a double salto forward or backward with or without turns. Another change on floor exercise is the special repetition. Only one strength element will be permitted for this cycle, and only one element from circles, flares, or Russian elements can be performed. So some gymnasts used to do 2 flare elements or 2 strength elements for their D score, and right now that's not going to be the maximum. Only permitted will be only one of these elements. Continuing with the floor exercise, we have the big change here with the element groups. Element group number 1 is the same, non-acrobatic elements. Element group 2, acro forward. Element group 3, acro backwards. It's the same as we know, but element group 4 are the single salto forward or backward with 1 or more turns. This starts with the front somersault with 1 twist or backward with 1 twist. The saltos with half twist still remain on the group 2 and 3 if performed forward or backward. So this is very important because there is no dismount element group on floor exercise. So on floor exercise, it doesn't apply the rule that the value of the dismount will be the value of the dismount group, because there is no dismount group. So on floor, the maximum score that gymnasts can get on the element groups is 2.0, just as it is right now. Maybe we're not going to go over the whole table. These are the elements that are now included in the element group 4. But basically, they start with the salto forward tucked with one twist or 1.5 twist, and they go on with the salto forward straight with one turn, two turns, 2.5 turns, three turns, 3.5 turns. That they have different values. They have the same value as we know them now. The Gochima, which is maybe the hardest on the forward part, it's still a G. It's a straight forward salto with 3.5 turns. And also going backwards, the full turn, or it's a B, which is the less difficult element, and all the way to the salto backward straight with 4 turns, which is an F. And in between we have the 3.5 twist, which is still an E, the 2.5, it's still a D, and the 1.5 or 2 turns, they're still in the same box, they have a C value. Also on the forward side, remember the full turn and the 1.5 turns, they are in the same box just as we do it now. So the repetition is something to look forward, especially because I think when we study floor, maybe we have to use some older routines. When I say old, maybe 10 years from now back. And there was no repetition of this element. So it's very important to know that, to remember that, and to be aware of that when judging all the routines. So we're going to talk next on the difficulty changes. On group 1, the non-acro parts, there are only 2 changes. The planche with legs together, it's now a C. It used to be a B, and it's in the same box as the swallow. I think this is good. Now you don't have to see or discuss it was too high or too low. It's the same element. And also from planche, press to handstand, it's a C, it's a D. It used to be a C, and it's also in the same box as the albarino, which is a press to handstand from a swallow. So it's the only 2 changes on group 1. The rest of the elements have the same value as we know. The Gogolatse is a C. The Russians, they keep their same value. That's not the same when we go to Pommel horse. They don't have the same value. And the changes on floor also are only on group number 3. The forward acro elements, they mostly have the same elements. We're not going to talk about that because all the changes are in the group 3. Double salto backward with 2 turns is still an E, but the difference is that now the 1.5 turns and 2 turns is included in the same box. So in this cycle, I think they used to be in different boxes, as well as the other variation which uses the first salto in a straight position. Arabian jump backward to double salto forward piked, and also with half turn. This is not a change, but it's just as a remember, just to remember, it's a knee part, double salto backward piked. Then that's an upgrade. It's now a D. And the triple back salto in tuck position, it's now an I element. And the triple salto backward, it's a J element. Also the double salto backward straight with 2.5 turns, this is an H element. It's going to be, it's an upgrade, as we're going to see in the following table. All of the layout backward saltos, double saltos have been upgraded. We see the salto backward straight with full turn and salto backward piked. This is a change. This is something new. It's a knee now. The double salto backward straight, it used to be a D, now it's an E, and it's in the same box as the double salto backward straight with half turn, or the tamayo, which is an Arabian jump to double front straight. Those three elements have E value, but they are in the same box. Also, the double salto backward straight with 1.5 turns, it's a G element. The Penev, which is a double salto backward straight with full turn, or Arabian double front with half, it's an F part. And double salto backward straight with 2 turns. This is an F part in the current cycle, and it's been upgraded to a G. And to finish the difficulty value changes, we have this, which is not an upgrade, but this is just a new element that was presented this year, I believe. This is the double salto tucked with 3.5 turns. It's a Minami from the Japanese gymnast. It's an H, and that follows the upgrade. Remember, the double triple is a G, so this has a half turn more, so it's an H. Double salto backward straight with 3 turns, it's an I element. And 3.5 turns in double salto straight, it's a J element. These two last elements used to be 1 letter lower than they are categorized in this new code. So these are the new changes, of difficulty values. And well, I think that's it on the difficulty values. On floor, there are no execution changes. The execution is basically the same. They always emphasize the incomplete twist, the landings, the simple leg, simple steps to arrive to the corners. And we must remember what's neutral deduction now for the floor exercise. Well, we're going to start to see the examples. The important part here is not that you practice directly into judging. I'm going to be talking over as the gymnast goes on, and then I'm going to show you the analysis I have done. So we have the first gymnast. He's doing his first line, which is a double back tuck with 2.5 twists. It's an F from group 3 as we know it now. Double twist to full twist forwards, 2 elements from group 4. And now he starts non-acro elements, a flare to hopping handstand 2 times, lower to flares, spindle to handstand, and lower to flares. Both elements have the same value, so you have to choose one of them because of the special repetition rule now. Only one flare element. Now his third diagonal is a double tuck. He gets a neutral deduction for using the same diagonal more than 2 times. Now he's going to the corner with a double twist, which is a C from group 4, no longer from group 3. Another diagonal, 2.5 layout back into a front layout, which is D4 and B2, and that's a connection value. And the last element is double full with a fall, so no stick landing. So we're going to see the analysis, which is kind of interesting because when we see all the elements he did, he has 1, 2, 3, 4 elements from group 4. He has 3 elements from group 3, the acro backward, and 1 from the non-acro elements. So he has 10 elements, but you have to leave out 2 of them. The second element of the flare L sequences and the layout front, which leaves him out without a group 2 and also without connection value. So in the end, the difficulty is 1F, 1E, 4 Ds, and 2 Cs. That the sum adds to 3.3 difficulty value, and you can see the groups Group 1 has 0.5 because it has a D element. It's only needed an A, but he has a D. Group 2 has no element, so 0.0. Group 3, he has an F, and he has an E also, and also a D at the end, so he gets the 0.5. And group 4, he has 2 Ds and 1 4, so the highest element is the D. He gets 0.5 also. So the element group's total is 1.5, and the final score, the final start value is 4.8. Also interesting to see 0.6 neutral deduction, 0.3 for the diagonals, and 0.3 because he doesn't have a balanced scale. So it's a bit different than we are used to now. So I would only like you to see, and maybe you can practice on your own. This is just a guide, remember. So we're going to move to the second exercise, second example. He's starting his routine, and here's the first element, a handspring into a double front with 1.5 turn. It's an F from group 2. Now he's moving to the corner, and he has a 1.5 back from group 4 into a double front pike with his an E from group 2, and also has connection value. Then a diagonal, a double straight, which is a G. This is a change. It used to be an F, now it's upgraded. Another diagonal, which is a Arabian double front with a half. He uses the diagonal 2 times and then goes into the corner with a Rudy, a front 1.5 turns. So right now the diagonals are okay. Now non-acro, a press to Japanese handstand from split, that's a C, group 1. Another diagonal, a 2.5 back into a layout front. Another connection value. We're going to see if the connection can be awarded after we leave out all the elements. And the dismount is a double layout with a stock landing. He has excessive arm strength, but he doesn't move his feet, so he gets the stick bonus. And a double layout is an E dismount, an E value. Sorry, it's an E element that has been upgraded, and that's why in the analysis we have the last element as an E and with a stick landing. So he has several high difficulty elements. He has 1G, which is the double straight, 1F, which is the first element, the double front with 1.5 turns tucked, and then he has also 2 E's, the dismount and the double pike front. He has 2 D's, which is the Arabian double front with half, and the back layout with 2.5 twists, and has 2 C's, which is the first one is the 1.5 backward connected to a double pike, and inverted cross from the non-acro group. So that leaves us with 1G, 1F, 2 E's, 2 D's, and 2 C's for a total of 3.7. The groups, they all have D or higher elements, group 2 and 3 and 4. And the non-acro is covered with a C, so he gets the 0.5. And you see that in the connection values I have written 0.2. That's because he has a C plus E in the second diagonal, and the dismount, which was stuck, so he gets another 10th for stick landing. I'm not sure if the MTC will use this as the connection value for the stick landing, or they will have a separate box for that. But for the meantime, we're going to do it like this. And you see he also has neutral deductions, but he has 0.3. It says there 0.6, but I remember the diagonals were okay, so there is no diagonal neutral deduction. The only deductions he would get is the lack of the balance scale, because the last element was a double layout, so it covers the special requirement. So we're going to move on to the next element, to the next example. This is a twisty routine, one of the top performers in the world now. And we're going to see the first element is the highest difficulty element now on floor. We're going to see, it's a double straight with 3.5 turns. That's a J. The second diagonal, it's a double triple, which is a G, also from group 3. Goes for the third diagonal, the double double, also from group 3. Now he's moving to the corner. He does a triple twist to the corner. Now the non-acro elements, he's doing a 3 Russians, so that's a C from group 1. Now he's moving to the corner, he's going to another diagonal. That's a front with 1 turn into a 2.5 twist forward. Now front layout, and he repeats the Rudy, which is the same box as the front full. And the last element is a 3.5 twisting layout backwards, no stick landing. So we're going to see the analysis of this routine. He has a J, that's 1 full point on difficulty, but we see that in this case we don't have an element from group 2. We will see that there is a B from group 2, but it's not among the top 8 elements. So the Rudy, which is a basic repetition, and the front layout are the 2 elements in this case that are left out. So that leaves us with a J, 1G, 3 E's, which are the double double, the 2.5 twist forward, and the dismount, which is a 3.5 twists. 1D, which is the triple twist on the corner, and 2 C's, the Russians, and the front full. So in this case, the difficulty adds up to 4.2, but you can see that group 2 has 0.0 because there is no element from group 2. And the rest of the groups, group 3, group 4, and group 1, they have 0.5. There are no connection values, there is no stick landing, so the D score is 5.7 and 0.9 of neutral deduction, because in this case no balance. He used 3 diagonals, and the last element was not a double salto. So we're going to move to the last example on floor. This, you all know this gymnast. It's another twisty routine, maybe more twisty than the last gymnast we saw. So let's see how it comes out. So the first pass is a triple twisting double layout. It's an I. Then a double triple, which is a G, both from group 3. Now a 2.5 into a backward into a 2.5 forward, and 3 diagonals already. Now a front full tucked into a triple front layout. That would be a B and an F, both from group 4. Now his strength part, it's a C, group 1, and moves to the corner. He has done no balance yet. 3.5 into a full front. Both elements are from group 4. It's a C the last one, and a knee for the first one. And now he prepares for his last diagonal, so no balance, which is a quad twist backwards. It's an F from group 4. So very interesting routine because it used to be one of the top performers, and let's see with current rules what he gets. So the first line is an I from group 3, so it gets 0.9 difficulty only on that line. He has no group 2 again, so in this gymnasts that have a lot of twisting, some of them don't get either group 3 or group 2. What we've seen now is group 2 is the one that's missing for all the twisty gymnasts. And we see very interesting here, we have to leave a D part from group 4 because he has 2 E's and 2 F's from group 4. So a D and a C from group 4 has to be deleted from the difficulty. And that leaves us with 1 G, 2 F's, 2 E's, 1 C, and 1 A. So that's again 4.2, 1.5 for the groups because he has all the groups but group 2. And again a 0.9 neutral deduction for the balance, for the diagonals, and for the lack of double salto on the last element. So this is a summary of what we have seen in the new code for the floor exercise. I think we've covered most of the things that are new. I hope this is going to be useful for you. And that ends the floor exercise. You see, when you get these gymnasts that do a lot of twists, and sometimes they don't have all the element groups, and we have to leave out some of the twisting elements because they all belong to group 4. So that ends up the floor exercise. Next is pommel horse. Okay, we are now on pommel horse. Pommel horse, not so many changes at first glance, but there are many changes really. Not as radical as on floor, but you're going to see there are many new rules that are going to affect some of the gymnasts. Different with floor, on pommel horse we have the same 4 elements we know. The group 1 is for the scissor and single leg cuts. Group 2 is for the circles and flares with or without spindle or handstands, the flop and combined sequences, Russians and Kersky swings. It's the same elements that belong to the same group as we know for this cycle. Element group 3 is the trebles and Russian trebles, including the Tom Fei and Gugonians and Roth. In this particular group, maybe it's important to know that some elements have been deleted, and particularly the crawl, which used to be a C element, is no longer on the code. And the group 4 is for the dismounts, the same dismounts we know, the Russians dismounts, handstand dismounts. All of the basic principles on the pommel horse have not changed. We're going to talk about some of the changes. So we go directly to the next slide, and the first change we see, it's that the Wu requires a minimum of 360 degrees of body turn completed with 2 hands between the pommels. Some of the gymnasts that are competing right now in this cycle only use 1 hand between the pommels when they do the 360 degrees first turn of the Wugonian. So we're going to see some examples of this if it's not clear just with the text. Most of the gymnasts do it correctly, so it's not going to affect most of the gymnasts. So in this case, if not 2 hands on the pommels, then there is no way to credit the wool, so it would be nothing. All travels with spindles should be started from the additional circle in the appropriate position. This rule doesn't specify travels forward or travels backward. I assume, and I already asked the MTC about this rule, and what I was told is that this rule was intended for the backward travels like Keikha 4 and Ursica 2, which are the Keikha 4 is 3/3 back travel with half spindle from position 1-1 to 5-5. And the Ursica 2, you may know some of the gymnasts that do it. It's the back or forward 3/3 travel with a full spindle in cross support. Another change is the pommel loop or pommel circle needs to finish on one pommel. The drawing changed from the 2022 code, and you can see here, you see a circle. In this variation, the gymnast could start a pommel loop with one hand down and one hand on the handle, and finish also with one hand down and one hand on the pommel. So in the 2025 code, this variation is no longer shown, and all the variations of the pommel loop finish on one pommel. So some of them start with one hand down, as we know, for example, starting a flop or before a handstand dismount. There can be a pommel loop that starts with one hand down. So this is the only change they've made to this element. One of the most important changes on this code is about the scissor. The scissor to handstand requires a leg change. This means like a double scissor. That means they have to cut or switch the legs before regrasping or before finishing the element. We're going to see a video so you can understand this a bit better. Okay, this is the scissor to handstand. This is the first example. We see a back scissor and you see the leg switches. So this is a C element. That's what you see it in green, the C in green. Now we see a forward scissor with some deductions, and you see there is no leg change. So this is not credit. Another example. Another scissor forward, there's a step down but still value, and there is a leg switch, so a D. It has deductions, of course, but the recognition is okay. Another example, this gymnast does the first forward scissor, that's okay with the leg switch, but then he does a back scissor, and you see does not include the switch, so the first one's okay, but the second one is not okay. This other gymnast does a back scissor with no change, so no credit. Another example, this is a back scissor with leg change, it's okay, so it's in green. And then a forward scissor that does not do the leg change. So I hope this is helps you understand what they want to mean with this. Might be one of the biggest changes, and I have to clarify that in the first document the FIG presented, it said that when no switching of the legs occurred during scissors to handstand, the element would be downgraded one letter. But this new version of July, it says no value, so no leg switch means no value. That means if if that's the only scissor the gymnast has, maybe means that will not get the credit for the group. So if we continue with the changes, before going into this with our changes, we must specify that most of the basic concepts of the pommel horse remain the same, like the upgrading for the handstands, circles to handstand or circles to handstand, and returning to the pommel horse or as a dismount. The flops rule, it's the same, and the combined the flops also is the same, which might be some of the most important things in the pommel horse. But the special repetition on pommel horse, even though we will only have exercises with 8 elements, there are a lot of special repetitions that restrict the number of elements that can be performed. So we're going to get into this. There is a maximum of 3/3 cross travel. This is the same as the current code, and the same elements, the Maillard over the pommels, the Maillard using the leather between pommels, passing over both pommels, the Drix, which is with hop, and the Cibado backwards over the pommels or under the pommels, or not using the pommels at all. The same elements are included in this special repetition, and it's the same concept that we know. Maximum of 2 Russian Wendeswins, only 1 on the end, and only 1 between the pommels. This is also the same. The only difference now is that all the Russians on the end have been decreased by 1 letter. The Russians on the leather, or between the pommels, I should say, they have the same value, but the Russians on the end, they have decreased, and also the Russians on the pommels, which is not an element we see. I haven't seen it in many years. Maybe the last gymnast I saw doing this was Nikolai Kryukov from Russia, used to do that. But the special repetition for the Russians is the same. For example, you count first the dismount. So if the gymnast does a 720 degrees Russians on the end, and another 20 degree Russians as a dismount, then you count the dismount, and the one in the middle of the exercise is considered a repetition. So it's the same. A maximum of 2 handstands in the exercise plus dismount. This is also the same. The 2 handstands can be either from scissors or circles, and the dismount. So there can really be 3 handstands in the whole exercise. This is the same concept also. Maximum of full spindle elements. This is also the same. There can be only 2, and the elements that are considered into this repetition are the same. Are the acorn, which is the full spindle from one end returning to the other end, and the full spindle on side support with the hands outside the pommels. We're going to see one example in the exercises I have, and the Maillard, which is the full spindle in cross support on the end. And remember, the Maillard in cross travel is in the same box as the Maillard on the end inside support. So these 4 rules of special repetitions are the same that we know from the 2022 code. So now we see some other special repetitions that are new. We already said that there was a maximum of 2 3/3 Russians traveling elements that can be performed. So in this case, the elements that are considered are 6. the tone fade that goes from one pommel that has a Z value, the normal tone fade with a D value, and the Bamen, which is a 360 Russian around the pommels. The normal Wugonian, which is an E, the Roth, we all know the Roth, which is a D, and the 630 degree Wu that starts in 1-2 position, which has a D value. So these 6 elements are the ones that can be performed under this rule, and so far it's the same as 200 as the code in 2022. However, this code has more restrictions on this. If you see the first line of this special repetition, the tongue fade C, the tongue fade D, and the Bamen, they are in the same line. And out of these 3 elements, actually, the gymnast can only do 1 from this, let's call it group. The code doesn't call it a group, but you see that they are in the same line. The gymnast can only perform 1 of this. And if you go to the second line, we have the D Wu, the E Wu, and the Rod. But only 1 from this line or group can be performed. That means gymnasts could perform normal Wu and a tongue fei, normal tongue fei. That would be an E and would be a D. But if what happens if they perform a Wu and a Rod? That is a very common combination right now. So since they are in the same line, so you only take the highest value element. So this is a bit tricky at start, but you, as long as you read it several times, you're going to get the idea. I think it's a lot of restrictions, but remember the routines are shorter now. So what the MTC wants is not to have the same elements performed over and over, but rather have more variety of elements. Another change is the maximum of 2 besugo and or son type of elements, including combined and handstands. Right now, this restriction is 2 for besugo and 2 for son. In the 2025 code, they mix them together and only 2 elements can be performed. That means if the gymnast does the besugo and then does the son, that's it. Even if he does the son or the davtian, which is the besugo for half besugo for the flops, then he has the right only to do 1 more, either besugo or son. So it's a little bit more limitation on this type of elements. Another very important change is a maximum of 4 elements in flare. We see during this cycle we have seen some gymnasts that all their routines are using flares only. They never do a double leg circle. So all the elements they do, and they do now 9 elements, or let's say 8 elements plus the scissor and the dismount. These are all in flares. So the MTC wants to limit this to 4 in flare, doesn't include the dismount. And something that is not written in the code, but I've already made the question and got the reply from the MTC, is that the Busnaris are considered flared elements because it is not possible to perform them only with double leg circles. So maybe the Busnari may start from a reverse Stockley, which is legs together, or Stockley or circle, pommel loop to handstand, which is legs together, and only the final part, the final circle actually is using a flare. So that's considered a flare element. Also, not seen so often, but flare to handstand, then do the twisting and traveling for the Busnari and return to flares. That's obviously a flare element. Also, the Busnaris have another restriction, and only 1 variation of a Busnari can be included in the start value. For example, if we have reverse Stockley to handstand and then the 3/3 travels with turn-in and lower to flare, we know that's the normal Busnari, that's an F. But if then the gymnast performs flare to handstand with the traveling and twisting and returns to flare, that's an E Busnari. So only the highest value is counted. Not many gymnasts do this, but the ones that do will only get credit for the higher element. So I clarified this. When we have new rules, we need to think on the test. Every judge thinks about that. Once the test is over, the coaches and the gymnasts start to tailor their routines according to the rules. So it's no longer a problem. It would be not usual that the gymnast presents a breach of the special repetitions. In some cases they do, but not so obvious like 2 Busnaris in a routine. So this is new special repetitions. We move on to more special repetitions. This special repetition, we've already talked about it, but the code also puts it twice. Travel elements, it says no more than one variation of the same element. That's in line with the Busnaris. Only one kind of Busnari can be presented. And in this case, we return to what the previous slide, when we had these 3 elements in the same line. The Tongfei from one pommel, the Tongfei from the leather, and the Bamen. So out of these 3 variations, only one from this group can be performed. We've already talked about it. What I wanted is to repeat it so you can learn it easier. And the second group of traveling Russians is the Wu with 630 degrees turn, the Wu with 2 Russians, which is an E, and a Rod. Only one from this group. So again, I repeat, for example, some gymnasts do a Wu and a Rod. And you can only count the Wu now. If the gymnast does a Tongfei or a Bamen and then does a Rod, that's okay because they are not in the same line. And the other traveling elements are the traveling elements with spindles. And what the MTC doesn't want to see is the Nin Reyes 1 and Nin Reyes 2 performed in the same exercise, because it's looks like the same element for the audience, even though the judges know it's not the same. Nin Reyes 1, just to remember, is 3/3 cross travel with half spindle using the first pommel, and the Nin Reyes 2 is a 3/3 travel in cross support, not using the pommels. That means from leather to leather. So if both are presented in the same exercise, even though they are not in the same box, it's a restriction, and only the Nin Reyes 2, which has an E value, gets the credit. The other one is considered repetition. However, this is very special because Nin Reyes 1 and Nin Reyes 2, they are in the same box of other elements. Nin Reyes 1 is in the same box as T-Tov, which is a side 3/3 travel with half spindle using the first pommel to the end. And the Keikha 2 is in the same box as the Nin Reyes 2, and the Keikha 2 is a cross 3/3 travel in the with half spindle and in back support. So it's like a Nin Reyes 2, but backwards. So the code puts another example, another 2 examples of this restriction. For example, the Nin Reyes 1 plus Keikha 4. The code says that's permitted. So that would be a D plus an E. because even though the Keikha 4 is in the same box as the nin reyes 2, it's not the same exercise. So to understand this special repetition, what the MTC doesn't want is to see the nin reyes 1 and the nin reyes 2 in the same exercise. So there's another example in the code, the T-top, which is the side variation of the nin reyes 1 plus nin reyes 2. So in this case, one is in side support and the other is in cross support. And even though both are forward, the code says this can be performed. So they get a D plus an E. And there are some other examples that I am including, but they are not in the code. For example, if the gymnast performs nin reyes 1 and T-top, that would be D plus repetition, but in this case, the principle is that they are in the same box. So remember, that's a simple repetition. Keikha 2 plus nin reyes 2 would be the same. The second one would be a repetition. And what about, this is not in the code, but if they do, the gymnast does T-top plus Keikha 4, so that would be correct. D plus E, and would be the same principle the code uses for allowing the gymnast to do T-top plus nin reyes 2. So this would be the same case as the last example I'm using in this slide, on this slide. So you need to read a bit of all these special repetitions on the pommel horse. They are many. So you need to read them so you can get the idea of what the committee wants. Well, another, that's talking about the difficulty already, so we move to the execution. The execution is practically the same as we have been doing during this cycle. However, there is a one thing that caught my attention, and it's that the angular deviations in cross support circles and travel has to be on each element. That means that on a Meyer and Cibado travel, there will be no more deductions for every third of the travel. So remember, if a very bad travel or two travels were presented, they could be deducted 5, 5, 5, 5, and 5. So that ended up with more than 2.5 deductions. So right now it would be one deduction, and if the judge considers that it's a 0.5, it would be 0.5 for the Meyer and 0.5 for the Cibado. That would be 1 point in the worst case. And remember, this is the deduction only for angular deviation, and can be more deductions on these travels as leg separation, poor form, or bending the breaking of the hips. You know, these elements, they have many deductions. So we're going to see some examples of the Meyer and Cibado. I have included my deductions. In this case, I consider the angular deviations is not bad, so I would have deducted 0.1 and 0.1. I'm not taking in consideration other deductions. In this case, you can see the difference. For me, it's more than 45 degrees, so it's 0.5 and 0.5. Maybe not more than 45, but close to 45. This case also is close to 45 degrees. So in this case, I said 0.3 and 0.3, but can easily be 0.5 and 0.5 also. So the concept now is to change this deduction, so it's going to be lower deductions, or that means higher scores in execution. And I think this was two elements that got a lot of deductions. You can easily go to 4 points deductions on pommel horse with the leg cuts and the travels and hip breaks and many mistakes that can be performed on the pommel horse. So we're going to continue. We're going to see the difficulty changes. I don't have the tables here for the pommel horse because I don't consider it necessary, because the you're going to see why the changes are not as many as in the other events. We're going to see on rings, on high bar and P bars, there are many changes as we saw on floor. But here, particularly the main changes are the Mikulak scissor, which is the double scissor from one end to the other end. Maintains the D value, but the change is that they deleted the with hop text. So there's no need to do the scissor with a hop. Some gymnasts, they don't do it with a hop, but still they were getting credit during these years. Another change is the Keikha 2 is now downgraded to a B. Used to be a C. That's a half spindle with both hands outside the pommels, and it's included now as a B with all the half spindles on the end of the horse, of course. So it's now a B and not a C. The sun is now a D. Used to be an E. So we have two elements that have been downgraded, and Russians on pommels and Russians on the end downgraded one letter. So a dismount with a 1080 degree turn would only be a C and no longer a D. A 360 degree Russian would only be an A and not a B anymore. The Drix is another element that has been downgraded to an E. It used to be an F, and it's gonna be in the same box as the forward travel over the pommels, and the cibado, that's the, let's say, like the Drix backwards, which is the element that was presented by the gymnast from Jamaica, Michael Reed. It's only an E only now. It was awarded an E since the beginning because of these changes that were going to be made for next year. And also the Kurbanov, that's the cibado without using the pommels. It's in the same box as the Reed. And all these four elements are E. On the element group 4, which is the dismount, the group on the pommel horse, the only, let's not say a change, but they included the when the dismount from circles or from 180 and 270 degree Russian, which is a text that didn't used to be written on the 2022 code. Another change is that there is no more an upgrade for flops performed in flares. Not many gymnasts did it. I can only think of a Japanese gymnast that does it. Internationally, I haven't seen it competing a flare flop. So these are the changes, the main changes. So I think there's no need to show the boxes or show the description of the elements. At first sight might seem there's not many changes on pommel horse, but I think if you combine all the rules that we've talked about, when you start judging, you're gonna see that it's not as easy as it sounds. We already mentioned that the crawl is no longer in the code, which was a C element, and now it's no longer in the code, as well as the Ursika 1, which was like a half Mogilny, just a Kerr, and a reverse Stockley without using the pommels. So those two elements are no longer in the code. So we're going to move on with the examples. Again, I'm going to talk a bit when the gymnast is performing. It's not the objective that you start judging now, but rather just to understand what's going on. So we're going to see the first gymnast. He starts with the scissors, has the switch of the legs, on both scissors, so both can get credit. Now the Russians, he does 1, 2, 3 Russians, so it's an E skill still. Now a combined D sequence followed by an E flop. Now he does the Mayer and Cibado, and watch out for the next element. It's a Wu, and see the hand, only one hand between the pommels, then followed by 2 Russians, and a dismount with more than full turn, so it's an E. So when we do the analysis of this example, we're going to have a lot of things to think about. And for example, we have the 2 scissors that were correctly performed. They have switching of the legs. Then he does a side circle. He does 3 Russians in between the pommels. Then the combined flop with half Russian. Then a 4 flop sequence. After the flops, he does a 1/3 back travel. Then he does the Mayer and Cibado sequence. Then he has the Wu. I have it crossed out because he only has one hand between the pommels. He completes the full turn with one hand between the pommels, so it doesn't go with the new rule that both hands must be inside the 2 pommels when the 360-degree first turn of a Wu is completed. Then he does 2 Russians on the end, which are only a B. It's only a B. So I have it crossed because it's one of the lower value elements. And then the dismount, which is an E. So in this case, we select the top 8 elements and we end up with 3 E's, 4 D's, and 1 C. Different as we did on floor, we need to see the element groups in a different way. We see group 1 needs to be covered by an A value part. He has 2 above that value, so it's okay, 0.5. Element group 2, he has 1 or 2 with an E, so he has 0.5 also. The group 3 has elements with D value, so also gets 0.5, and element group 4, in this case in Pommel horse, is the dismount, so he gets 0.5 because he performed an E, so he gets 0.5. There's no connection on Pommel horse, there's no stick bonus, so we get 2 points of the element group, and we get a final score of 5.4 for this gymnast. Okay, we're going to see the next example. Watch out for this exercise. It has a lot of things to watch out. So here it goes. We see the gymnast that will not start with scissor, goes directly into flares, does an acorn, which is an E. Now watch out this full spindle, watch the end position, it is incorrect. Now a back scissor with leg switching. Now he's moving into the flop sequence. He does 4 elements, which is an E. Now he does a Wu, and now he does a rod. So he gets in trouble with the special repetition. Now to combine the sequence and the flare travels forward and backwards. We're going to see how many elements he has in the analysis. And the dismount, maybe the support on the last part of the horse, it's doubtful. I gave the benefit and I think it's okay. I want to show you the second element. However, this gymnast, when he ends the element, only one of his hands is outside of the pommel. The right hand, you can see, is on one of the pommels. So what the current rule says, and This is not written really in any newsletter, and it's not written in the code, but it's actually in the presentation of the first World Championships from 2022, and it says that this element must be started and finished with both hands without using the pommel. So it's sometimes it's difficult if you're not watching the placement of the hands of the gymnast. So if we see the analysis of this element of this gymnast, we see first he does an acorn, which is a E2 and a flare element. Then the second element is only a B and also a flare element. Then he does a C scissor that is with a switch of the leg, so it's okay. Then an E flop, a woog onion, which is an E, and then he does a rod. And remember the special repetition, you cannot include both of them. Then the combined Russian for a D. Then two treble elements, Cibado and Mayer in flares. And the dismount, which I think it's okay to give a D for that. So we have 1, 2, 3 and 4 elements on flares. Just to remember the acorn, the half spindle, and the two trebles. However, when we select the top 8 elements, the B spindle is not in the best 8, so actually this gymnast only has 3 elements in flares. So it's not a problem. Maybe the only problem here is the rod that cannot be included. What would have happened if he does another D? Then maybe the scissor would be left out. This is a reasoning as we do with the current code. So in the end, we finished with 3 E's, 4 D's, and 1 C. That means 3.4 in difficulty values. And group 1 is okay. Group 2 is also covered by a D or higher element. The group 3 also. And group 4 we can only award 0.4 because the dismount was a D. So in this case, remember the first example, the gymnast got 2 points in the element groups, but this gymnast has 1.9. So in the end, the difference of the start value is 5.3 for this gymnast. Okay, we're going to see the example number 3. This is also a very complicated exercise. If you don't have that much experience, it may give you trouble, but since you can watch all these exercises later and you can pause it, you can pause all the elements, I think it's going to be a good practice for any level judge. So we're going to see this Japanese gymnast, and he does many or maybe all of the routine is on flares. He does a C scissor, and then he starts with a Busnari. Remember, it's a flare element. Now he's doing a Keikha, a full spindle outside the pommels. Then he did a Keikha 4, an acorn. Now he's doing an Ursika. Everything's in flares. Cibado over the pommels. A Mayer over the pommels plus a Cibado. Then a side travel over both pommels. And dismount, which is a knee. He completes the turning and all the supports. I suggest you can compare the analysis sheet that I have with the video, and if you didn't get all the elements, you can pause everything. We're going to see the analysis. In this case, we saw first a C scissor, which is okay. And this is very important and very difficult also. There's a double leg circle after the scissor. He completes it, and then he does a Stockley to handstand, Busnari for F value. Then he does the Keikha 4. He doesn't complete full circle without the pommels or with hands outside the pommels. He does the full spindle outside the pommels, which is an F, which is called the Keikha 4. The Keikha, this is the Keikha 1, sorry. And after that, we have the Keikha 4, which we saw in the special repetition rule with the Nin Reyes type of elements. In this case, we cannot count this element, but not because of a special repetition. But the reason is because there was no circle before this element. And remember that traveling spindles need a full circle in the intended position before them. I could almost be sure that none of the gymnasts that are competing internationally now perform it correctly according to the 2025 rules. Maybe I can be wrong, but I'm sure that no one does a full back loop before a Keikha 4 or before an Ursika 2. So in this case, maybe the traveling spindles forward can be easier because it's but not all the gymnasts do it. So in this case, the Keikha 4 cannot be counted, and then it's followed by a acorn, which is the full spindle from side to side, and also our third element on flares. And then he does the Ursika 2, which is the crossed 3/3 travel with full spindle. In this case also there is no value because there was not a full circle before the element. And remember that it doesn't have to be a full circle. It has to be a full circle in the same position as the travel. So it has to be a full back loop. And that's not the way most of the gymnasts do this element right now. Then we have a Meyer over the pommels, which is an E. Remember, this element will now be in the same box as the Drake's, which has the same value. And in this case, this is our fourth element. And if you see, all the elements that we have counted so far are E, E, F, and F. So in this case, we still have two travels, a Cibado travel in flares, which would be the fifth, and obviously we will not be able to count it, and a side travel from 1-2 to 4-5, which is a D, and it's also the sixth element on flares. So this gymnast can only use 4 elements in flares, plus would be the fifth element, number 5 would be the scissor, element number 6 would be the dismount, which is an E. However, he completes a full circle before the Busnari, and that's his fourth element from group 2. So you can include this element, this side circle. So that's why it's very important to write down the side circles. And in this case, it's 1/10 more for this gymnast. And his difficulty only has 7 elements, doesn't have the 8 elements, still gets 3.1 difficulty values, if I'm not wrong. And his 3 first groups are okay, the scissor is okay, group 2 is okay, group 3 also, and the dismount gets 0.5 because the dismount was an E. So in this case, the start value is 5.1. It's a relatively high value, even though all of the elements that we had to leave out. And again, I clarify this is not going to happen in the real new code, but for testing purposes, we need to be aware of all these restrictions. So we move on with example number 4. Many of you will know this gymnast and might not be as complicated as the last one. We see the Mikulak, followed by a combined very hard sequence. It's a G because it has 3 Russians with 2 flops. We see the sun, remember, it's not an E anymore, but the Besugo that follows, it's an E. He's doing now 4 flops. Then the Wood's correct because it has 2 hands on the middle of the horse when completing the first turn. Then a Mayer and a Cibado. And the dismount, which is a D. So in this case, pommel horse is always tricky, so if you didn't get the difficulty, I suggest you go back, compare with the sheet. I may have some mistakes, and if you find mistakes, please let me know in the comments. So here's the analysis. In this case, we have the D scissor. We have a combined sequence, flop sequence, very difficult one. 3 Russians on 1 pommel, preceded by 2 flops, which is a G. The sun, remember, it's downgraded, it's a D now. The Besugo keeps the value as E. Then he does a flop, 4 flops on 1 pommel, that's an E. A Wu, an E. Then 2 travels, a D and a D, and a D dismount also. So actually this routine doesn't have any special repetition problem. It was shown here not only because it shows difficulty elements, but to remember that the sun is a D part. And so when we count the top 8 elements, we have to leave out a D, which is the Cibado. And in this case, we end up with 1 G, 3 E's, and 4 D's. That adds up to 3.8. Group number 1 is okay. Group number 2 it's also okay, has a D plus element. Group number 3 also has D plus elements included. And the dismount group gets 0.4 because the dismount is a D. So element groups total it's 1.9, and the start value of this routine would be 5.7. We're gonna see the last example of pommel horse, which is the last example of this first part. So we see the gymnast that's going to perform on the pommel horse. He does a forward scissor with leg switch, it's okay. A back scissor, also switching legs, so both can be counted. Russians again between the pommels. A check. A B treble backwards. A Wu, which is okay. We see Russians now, 3 Russians. Then a Ruth. We're gonna see what we will do with this. And the dismount, which is a D dismount. So this routine has 2 elements that we need to discuss what to do. So we see the analysis, and first and second scissors are okay. Then we have a Russian between the pommels, an E, because it's 3 Russians. Then we have a check, which is a B part, and 2/3 travel backwards, it's a B also. We have a Wu, and the Wu was correctly performed. Both hands were between the pommels when the 360-degree turn was completed. And after that Wu, we had 3 Russians on the end. There's no breach of the special repetition. We have a Russian between the pommels and a Russian on the end. Since there is no dismount, so this Russian, it's okay. However, remember, even though it's 3 Russians, it's only a C because it's been downgraded. And after that, we also have Ruth. The Ruth cannot be counted because it's a special repetition with the Wu. even though the gymnast has the right to do two traveling elements, 3/3 traveling elements with Russians, two variations of the same element cannot be performed, and in this case that's the reason why the rod cannot be included. And the D dismount, again, we have a D dismount which will only get us 0.4, and the rest of the groups will get 0.5. Again, we have 1.9 in the element groups, and we have 2 E's, 2 D's, 2 C's, and 2 B's. That adds up to 2.8, and in this case the start value will have a 4.7. So this is all for the first part of this presentation. On the second part, we're going to talk about rings, p-bars, and high bar. So hope to see you in the other video. Take care.